Good evening, everyone. I'm Diane Funston. This is the third Thursday of the month, so it must be Poetry Square. Welcome, everyone. For those who don't know, we have 3 poets each month that I kind of spotlight and feature. And with the wonders of Zoom, they're all over the place. So tonight we have 2 who are close by, one from Sacramento, one from Nevada City, and then we have a woman from Florida where she tells me the weather is wonderful. So I'm going to read a few poems for you, and then we'll have our readers come up one at a time and just relax and enjoy, and, it'll be a wonderful evening. I'd like to thank again YubaSutterArts&Culture for presenting this program. And I'm the poet in residence for this year for YubaSutterArts&Culture. And if you're not familiar with them, look them up. They have many wonderful offerings. Most of them, like any place else now, are virtual. But let's get started. And we're wonderfully receiving rain now, which is something that California has been in need of. It's been way too dry, and it's nice to see the rain and hear the rain. So this is called a seasonal offering. Winter chills bone deep, creeps up from toes, loiters in joints, and whispers a lullaby to motivation. Tucked in between blankets, in front of wood stoves, we greet the frosty season. Books come down from neglected shelves, forming a fort, a solitary wall of inspiration. Thick novels, epic poetry, gardening guides offer sanctuary from wind, rain, snow. A hearty feast for the mind, an ice age away from the frivolity of summer. And I have to say, this year, we've probably had our books closer by than usual with all of our sheltering in place for this very unusual year. And this one is called Rain. It is the time of rain, the scent of it arriving, open senses, downpour of memories, a want of keeping inside, holding close, nesting within, the creative cottage of windows where rain drops start softly, almost unnoticed at first, toward the steady march of showers to cacophony of storm, cataract of water over bedroom skylights, and the earth open and receiving. Green leaves washed clean of complacent summer dust drink their fill of winter rain. So dry California, so many months. Then the ecstasy of release. It is the time of rain. And in this season, holiday season, Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever you may celebrate, a lot of us go back to our own upbringing, our own childhood memories. And this is some of mine, childhood memories. Grandma grew African violets and asparagus ferns in the gumwood-framed dining room window. Grandpa would pinch a leaf or two from a nursery. She'd root them in a jelly glass and propagate more. Outdoors, our city garden had a salad bar of tomatoes, carrots, peppers, string beans, and corn. Sunflowers fed the birds while 7 sisters exploded like fireworks in a universe of petunias. Grandma's hands were small, but never fragile. The blue veins traced the map of her experience, smooth skin softened by dishwater and potting soil. Her fingernails filed short for ease in tatting, the fine work of making lace using a metal shuttle. Her fingers, always busy, chopping vegetables, canning fruit, caressing the fur of our tabby cats, stroking the unruly hair of her only grandchild. She could calm both beasts and girl with a gentle touch. On Sunday, we went for long, unplanned drives. Grandma never learned to drive, but gave directions from the passenger seat, with me snuggled in the middle. We rode to places they kept safe in their memories, sharing stories of dance halls and speakeasies, long gone from the shorelines of Lake Ontario. We'd skip stones across the bay with more tales of band concerts, now ghosts of amusement parks, times of ice delivery and ragmen and backyard chickens. The Sunday drive always rewarded us with frozen custard, my grandfather with chocolate, but Grandma and me the rich canvas of vanilla. Sometimes we watched the 1905 carousel at the beach, more stories of roller coasters along the shore, midway games, 10 for $1, fortune tellers, and full moon strolls. The way back home, my head on Grandma's lap, her warm fingers in my hair, then I'm sound asleep. Back home, greeted by tabby cats, after supper swaying on the porch glider as it wheezed, whites while cicadas sang their hypnotic, humid chorus. The safe haven of grandparent love, the best memories of my childhood. And this is a short piece called Christmas Cookies in 100 Words. It's the season for expectation and want. The yellowware bowl comes out of the closet. The rough pine board is sprinkled with white flour. There is nostalgia in warm lighting and closeness, whether it was ever true or not. Now we talk of the old ways. We conjure up the best memories, even if we remember them most from old movies. We travel backwards with the scent of vanilla. Patience watches the timer for perfection. We lower our standards for mental health. It's never like the Hallmark cards or the Kincaid paintings, and like Christmas cookies, the best ones are those overdone. This is called A Dazzling Illusion. Driving in pouring night rain, outside lights merge together, a kaleidoscope angle, not unlike bold, abstract paintings. Brilliant colored strokes spread over my windshield like art under glass. Remind me of Christmas tree lights viewed through tears. A child in my grandfather's threadbare, abandoned chair. I tried to block the tears, pooling in vacant pockets under the lids of expectant December eyes. I'd squint, stare at the new artificial tree, trying to blur the green plastic back to the fragrant spruce and my grandfather's stories. Now I watch all the street colors spin poinsettia pinwheels in a dazzling illusion. Rain and taillights in California winter, so many odd years later, preserved like a souvenir scorpion under a cheap acrylic dome. And this one, I came from a German-American family. And marzipan, or almond paste, was very important. My grandfather loved it, and the German shops years ago would all have it, usually molded into little candies, fruits, and vegetables. This is called marzipan. The pastry held no visual memory, round, flat, sugar-iced, upheld on a crystal platform, cut into rustic triangles, dessert after literary repast. After the first taste, memories melted as a moist, dense almond filling from the flaky butter shell broke. Sugar coating cracked, mixed together like old photographs in a newly unstuck drawer. After the third sneaky slice, I was lost in Grandma's kitchen, at my old vinyl upholstered chair, coffee time in late afternoon, sharing of conversation, of rich almond pastry, of childhood upheld, sugar-coated after 50 years. We had, like a lot of German American families, at around 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we had what is commonly called a coffee clutch. And you had coffee, which I drank since I was 10, and you always had a sweet that went with it. And a lot of times it was cheesecake, or especially the almond-filled pastry was just wonderful. So it brought back memories. And this one is called Christmas Eve 2006. Christmas Eve 2006. Emily and I on the couch, white dog, blue woman, listening to Christmas carols in the season of joy and reflection. Warm with candlelit half-light, musing over memories of Christmases past, this Christmas passing unnoticed. The smoke from a blown-out candle disappears into a room with two hearts beating, woman and dog. Woman with memories of embraces, of glittering jewelry, of lies. And I'm going to end with this poem, true story. It's called Kneading, N-E-E-A-D-I-N-G, like kneading bread. And this was a high school memory. As I knead Christmas cookie dough, the scent of pure vanilla reels me backwards, rewinding the calendar in an old-time cartoon motioned into movement. Sent back into Grandma's yellow kitchen, her gray formica table, the large yellowware bowl pardoned from the place in the closet for the holiday baking tradition. To memories of Mrs. Lisi, my home economics teacher, protesting, "No, dear, you don't need butter cookie dough. You must be mistaken. There is no need to knead." She smirked at her pun beneath her peacock blue eyeshadow when I told her our family recipe for cookies from family far off in Germany. I know Mrs. Lisi was wrong. There is a need to knead. Warm scent of pure vanilla masks the ammonia smell of traditional hartshorn used in our recipe, in that yellow kitchen, in the yellowware bowl, where memories press between butter-anointed fingers as I keep kneading to remember. Thank you. That's all for my poetry. And we're going to have the first woman who's coming up to read is from Sacramento, and her name is Roni Bopla. And she'll be joining us, and I believe she has some visuals to go with her poetry. And she's a very accomplished, eksphractic, I can never say that, poet. In other words, she likes to write poetry to photographs and to paintings in art galleries and such. But and then we'll be followed by Maxim McCann from Nevada City, and we'll end the night with Jen Karetnik, who comes to us from Miami, Florida. And that'll be our show this evening. So hope you enjoy it. Sit back, get warm, wait for the rain. I guess we have a few days reprieve, and enjoy the show.
Thank you, Diane. It's a pleasure to be part of this reading series, and Diane and I go back to our days at Women's Wisdom, and I appreciate the invitation to read today. And also special thanks to Shantae Arroyo, who is on tech, and it's a pleasure to spend this time with Maxima and Jen. Currently, I'm in the Master of Fine Arts in Writing at Pacific University, based in Oregon. And I'd like to dedicate my portion of the reading to Marvin Bell. In the early 1990s, as a little preface, I majored in biological sciences, but I caught on very quickly that I loved literature, especially at that level. So I ended up minoring in comparative literature at UC Davis. And one of the classes that I took two classes actually with this professor. It was Mark Blanchard. One of the classes, we read Survival in Auschwitz. And I reread this memoir recently 2 more times, and I've begun a manuscript based on this memoir. And Marvin Bell has helped with many of these poems that I'm reading tonight. The first poem is directly out of the memoir, and it is by Primo Levi. Primo Levi, the author of Survival in Auschwitz. And this poem has no title. It is at the beginning of the book, just after the preface. You who live safe in your warm houses, you who find returning in the evening hot food and friendly faces, consider if this is a man who works in the mud, who does not know peace, who fights for a scrap of bread, who dies because of a yes or a no. Consider if this is a woman without hair and without name, with no more strength to remember, her eyes empty and her womb cold like a frog in winter. Meditate that this came about. I commend you these words. Carve them in your hearts. At home, in the street, going to bed, rising. Repeat them to your children, or may your house fall apart. May illness impede you. May your children turn their faces from you. Primo Levi. And I begin the reading of my own poems now. Condemned, 1944. After the Journey, a chapter in Primo Levi's Survival in Auschwitz. The written order has arrived. Is there enough courage to see? The condemned are all Jews, not one exception. What do men and women do before they die? Have the courage to see the condemned, no exception. An innocent person will ready to leave from life in a manner that most suits them. Some pray, some drink to a lustful intoxication, and I am a grandmother preparing food for the journey. Schools are in session for this last day, but no homework for the children. The journey to Auschwitz will be unlit. See all of the bundles of what we think we need, placed together at the door. Have the courage to see the condemned, no exception. I loosen my hair, take my shoes off, and place the Yahrzeit candles in the middle of the uneven floor. By the flickering, the light casts shadows on our faces. We look at one another for the last time. These are my people who have no land, a mourning unseen. Have the courage, see my past, a dissolution and erasure. Manner of being. After the chapter, The Events of the Summer in Survival in Auschwitz by Primo Levi. By his natural and plain manner of being good is what you say about him in your book, Mr. Primo Levi. Lorenzo you recognize as the star-filled warmth of compassion against cold starkness of bestiality. Even the pathetic state of man rendered by Nazi fascism did not penetrate the good nature of Lorenzo, the man who is credited for saving your life. They forced the grind of internal organs through hunger, hunger, and hunger. The internal bowls scraped, bowls for soup stolen, for hunger. Bowls hung against bodies like secondary stomachs, filled only at the whim of kapos, a body of men, forced supervised labor, who took to violent nature to stay alive. They beat you and forced your souls to fester at the behest of the daily reveille, marching stickman gait, while the flesh of feet ground into sores within wooden shoes. There is no end to that music in the beginning or end of your chapters of horror. Yet you say, amid this recounting, Lorenzo, who by his natural manner, still pure and whole, not corrupt, not savage, extraneous to hatred and terror, gave you, when he could, some ration of bread, and you say he helped you manage to not forget that you yourself were a man. Switching gears slightly, my study plan at the university is poetry, and I like focusing on world issues, so I'm reading books that cover all continents. Here is one that is called Past Sex, July 20, 2020. My cracked bone is invisible, but is behind my dermis, that brown bag of pliable skin, bent corner of my finger. It'll show up one day as the radiologist will ask, why didn't I come in earlier? Such hindsight, not helpful when there is so much work to do. There is a large nuclear arsenal available in the hospital radiology department, some for the purpose of treatment. Yes, it would need careful handling. A shift to the left of 1/10 of a degree, table at ground zero. But wait until the signal starts and the beeping. It's getting worse. The pain of resilience, the pain of persistence, and the level of repeated tragedy of conflict between geopolitical parties. Rahul Gandhi's dismay, thinking and even saying out loud, Modi is weak. It could only happen like this. Why didn't he see the escalation, skeleton of ideas playing out by China's expansionism and her plans for world domination? That idea, like a record playing repeatedly in Trump's mind, sorry, Modi's mind, or some man Gandhi's mind, sorry, who is in charge? What diplomats? What women? What voices of reason? Listen, the India-China skirmish is getting worse. How can it get worse when it was worse to begin with? The fight over land, the steep cliffs of the Himalayas, the line of actual control dotted across Ladakh, almost the furrowed roads, India side. The defense minister pats each soldier's back amid a standing ovation. China, are you watching? The next poem is an ekphrastic poem, and you know, it's interesting that word ekphrasis is a Greek word, and part of my next semester is coming up with an alternative expression for that word that is a little bit more relevant to my heritage, but also acknowledging that writing in response to or around visual art has been going on for centuries and centuries. So I'll come up with a new word, and when you and I meet in the future, we'll talk about it and see if you like it. But for now, it's called ekphrasis. And this next poem is Between Birth and Death, after the Kundu of Papua New Guinea. And this will be relevant to an image that Shantae is helping me with. Between birth and death, after the Kundu of Papua New Guinea. 1. Inside tree logs, hot coals smoke. The drum maker hums a Kundu drum song, burning design by etch of song, sour wind and sun-split sand. Rub on mud-colored palette for a Kundu, whose middle belly cars with perfect coals, heat and wood, music to ritual, layer, hot hiss, layer, snake and lizard beware. 2. Goat hide for voice of tabla and daga, stretched hollow for tap and hit tone dong. Flat hand pound on tabla and fingertip daga tip tip dong. Pair to each hand, take this iron smear to ink the tabla, black flat, nipple resonant daga goat gift. The dark fast around sound, black iris on skin, tap on rims, the smell of ink. 3. Between the pause of the funeral tabla, a father in the next room says goodbye to the bride, full of red and embroidery, draped in the silk from the dead chest of her grandmother next door, her naked hand pulled out from a bracelet. A child passes through to give the goodbye gift to the father, the son of the dead grandmother. He sees his mother one last time in his daughter, and they play the wedding beat of the kundu drum. And I believe I have time for the last image, which is Snake of Fire, which is a poem based on South African Zimbabwe border fence by Dan Halter. This is an image that is from the Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archive in Berkeley, California. And it is a wire fence, and it was constructed by South Africa's apartheid regime in the 1980s. And in the image, you may see that there are wires, and those would electrocute anyone who tried to cross that border. I won't read the 3 iterations of this poem. This is a poem that has 6 stanzas, and it can be read 3 different ways. I will just read it one way. It's called Snake of Fire After South Africa's Zimbabwe Border Fence by Dan Halter. The windowless door, the perfect barrier between fear, between people, and compassion and place, tilled without love, a falsehood, any barrier, a perfect place of people, a view of self, without compassion, with a loveless facade, collect dead bodies, raped to a broken spine, across parallel woven metal, between fears, minus compassion, waiting unbroken, till to perfection, parallel markings of history. Truth is the window, a clearing of barriers. Thank you for the opportunity.
Welcome. This is Maxima Khan. Thank you, Roni. Thank you, Diane, for these gorgeous poems. It's really lovely to sit and listen to you both. Well, there was a little invitation that Diane put out for us to say a little bit about how we came to writing poetry. So I'll just say 2 things that I think were pivotal. And one is that my parents loved literature, and they used to read to us a lot as kids. And one summer we took a road trip across the country, spent several months traveling around, camping everywhere. And they had memorized the book, The Little Fur Family by Margaret Wise Brown, and they would recite it to us every night. So just hearing that repeated wonderful phrases and having them become so a part of my inner landscape. And then later on, my father used to recite other poems. And I thought that this was the most magical thing, to be able to recite a poem from memory. And it made a deep impression on me as a kid. So that's a couple of the background bits. I'm going to start by reading a few poems from my new book, Fierce Aria, which came out this year from Finishing Line Press. And I'm going to start with the first poem in the book, Winter, since we're heading into winter here on Monday officially with the winter solstice. Winter. All night the ravens release a black crying, as if they held worlds we can never touch. It's the woods where the breathing moves, where night, well, you know, at some point you have to come back to your own house. All the spells of the others, you have to leave them. Even the apple the old witch gave you. You're not going to wake up to salvation. You know that by now. But inside, where the cupboards are filled with the familiar, where loneliness languishes in narrow beds, here there is something you can build with. There isn't any choice about where to start. Always the beginning, small and limited as it seems. One rose in a cup, the mouse gnawing the cereal, laundry, muttering in a basket. After that, I can't say. The woods are dark. Here is the gate. And my own amazement cries me to sleep. My book, Fierce Aria, is set up in 3 sections, which I think of as musical movements, like in classical music, and they're named with musical indications. So that first poem was from the first section, Andante Cantabile, and this next poem is from the second section, what I think of as the slow movement, Adagio Mesto, which literally means slow and sad. And this is a poem called Another Dose of Pleasure for Mark Doty. It was inspired by watching the Lannan literary video of Mark Doty giving a reading from his memoirs of when he was caring for his longtime lover who died of AIDS, the long period of caring for him and the grieving after. And it was just an excruciating memoir, and then his beautiful poems. And afterwards, the interviewer asked Mark Doty, "What are you looking for in your life now?" And Mark Doty answered, "More." And I was so struck by the courage in that answer after all he had been through. So I wrote this poem inspired by that. Another Dose of Pleasure for Mark Doty. 1. Ravaged by grief and loss, by losing, he nursed his lover through the diminishing hours, watching and recording as once cherished faculties, loved pastimes, were stripped away, and life revealed itself to be perilous, inconstant, perplexing, unspeakably beautiful. As friends and acquaintances fell in startling numbers in the same unstoppable plummet toward death or bereavement, those were the choices then. He wrote, refusing to be silenced, as the sea corroded the dunes, and the dunes in answer broke out in resplendent bloom. As storms trashed the harbor, the seaside town, then left it glittering, somehow more radiant in the morning light. Tell me where they end, he wrote, observing how fog blurs the line between land and sea, sea and sky, observing how the edge of death is made hazy by love. And when it had all been taken, burned, hollowed out, and he woke and saw the sea still shimmering, the sky an unrepentant blue, he asked for just one thing, more. 2. This is our life. We take it on and wear it, ragged kimono of glittering threads, trustworthy sheath and companion, our own peculiarities as familiar and warm to us as bread, as smooth stones rubbed long between our hard hands. We learn by doing. This is the inescapable rhythm, bitter tang of truth. How could we do otherwise? But take what's given, swallow it whole, greedy for more. Another dose of pain, please. Another dose of pleasure. And this next poem is from the final section of the book. The section's called Allegro Grazioso, which means lively and with grace. And this poem's called Where Everything is Music. And I brought up this image because I designed this lovely postcard of this poem, Where Everything is Music. And I just want to give a little plug for any of you who are interested in supporting the arts in an immediate way and following, in my case, my own creative process and my creative works. I would love for you to join me on Patreon, patreon.com/YubaSutterArts&Culture. facebook.com/MaximaCon. It's an amazing place where for literally a few dollars a month, you can get insider access to the lives of different artists. And one of the benefits is I mail you this beautiful broadside postcard with a handwritten note for you. So here's the poem that's on the postcard, Where Everything is Music. It starts with a quote from Rumi. We have fallen into the place where everything is music. Jalaluddin Rumi. How often the heart shatters, as if shattering were its purpose. Shards rain as a loved one leaves, as a new revelation tears me open. As I mourn the self I failed. Who knew wider had no limit? Who knew rawness is the heart's condition? All this pouring light would bring such fullness, I nearly choke on love. I am swimming and drowning at once, head barely above water, then not above. Life nearly wiping me out. Yet here in these waves, I believe I can hear fragments of luminous song. And I want to read a couple poems written this year, in this very weird year we're in. The first one's called Glimmer. And this poem was inspired, before the shutdown, just before the shutdown, I took a writing workshop with Pam Houston, and she was sharing this idea that she shares of writing down glimmers from your day, sort of moments, sensory details, and collecting these and assembling them to make some sort of story, or in my case, poem. And this is something that's very challenging for me to do. So it birthed this poem, Glimmer. You ask me for a glimmer from my days, sameness of days. How can I tell you? The loops of my letters trail off into open air. They don't gather back as they should. How can I tell you? I walk the same streets if I go out at all. A friend says she would like to study each leaf, to spend her life in such close contemplation. But I am Dickinson, shut in my chambers, Mirabai calling, come inside and behold the maker. Shame would crowd me out, tell me I have nothing to say. But John Cage called that saying of nothing the essence of poetry. I am done pleading for a place at the table that wasn't set for me. What glimmers in my day is the insistent press of sadness in my chest, an old green truck rusting in the sun, beguiling in its decay and shapeliness. What is it about older things that gives them grandeur? We search through houses online, my husband and I. Anything newer than 1950 looks tawdry behind its show of gables. Where is a thing lovingly crafted? That's why there will always be a need for poetry. You ask for a glimmer, this is mine. This ache, this walk through the cold, bright, empty streets, the green truck, my doubt, the place at the table not set. And this next one was written at the start of the pandemic. It's called The Business of Beauty. The Business of Beauty. The white flakes drift down on the immense quiet of the world. Streets fill with a thick slurry of snow. Ornamental trees already in flower are painted, each branch a blurred cottony line, the weight of which all that tender care has caused some branches to break. Even whole thin trunks, the width of a woman's arm, have bent over to touch the ground. Lying there, heaped broken limbs of red bud, burdened with blossoming garnets, sugared with snow, carry on nonetheless the business of beauty. These ornamentals, cherry trees, redbud, splash pointillistic color onto the canvas of white. No one else is out walking. One car drives by. The woman at the wheel wears a surgical mask, doesn't meet my eye. People hide in their homes, though they might be out walking through the falling, as I am, in this silent neighborhood, its wide, flat streets, my boots sloshing through the slush, face tingling with cold, eyes bright with the pearled light of a snow-blessed morning, witnessing the work of trees, the solemn, also gleeful, labor, and the love the sky lavishes in white drifts on every living thing. And I'll end with one more poem from Fierce Aria from my book. It's called You Have Permission. Permission is a lot of what I do as a teacher, is grant permission. And I guess I should say, if any of you are interested, I do have some wonderful classes coming up right in the new year, both a writing class and I also teach the Artist's Way. And you can find out about those on my website, which is brilliantplayground.com. You have permission. You have permission to want beauty, to press it into the bone, to gather in the storm howling into the wind, to want manna and a heaven to shelter us, to long for the warm tide of arms, to believe in the broken bones mended, to cast in stone and bronze, to know you are separate in the same breath one. How fragile the illusion of the body is. To dance inside your clothes, you can't help it. We are strung beads on God's necklace, learning a new old language of love. No matter how you stumble over your feet, over forms, there's a deeper freedom, a stronger grace. If you look up in the sky, do it now. Birds, clouds, moon, or inside your own hollow body, you will know what I mean and come running into this vast embrace. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jen Karetnik. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Diane. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Shantae, for running the tech, which probably none of us could do. And thank you, Roni and Maxima, for your beautiful poems. I'm going to start with one from my first book. This is a poem about wine, which is probably appropriate because I'm drinking wine. But it's also a poem from my childhood. It's called Hang Time, and it starts with an epigraph from Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. It is not a song of the Scuppernong from warm Carolinian valleys, nor the Isabel and the Muscadel that bask in our garden valleys. It was not a song, but a muted ring of sorts against the rim of the rusted basketball hoop, looped with grapes that enticed the occasional game. Unforeseen growths, both pole and vine, sprang from the same patch of ground in an abandoned lot where cats marked the court with their fragrant lime, and skeletons of squirrels hid under nearby leaves for seasons. The grapes hung like the long-gone net. A single bunch the ball would sometimes graze but not dislodge. Stubborn beads, they turned from lima bean green to bitten lip red, but stayed as small as the evergreen berries we were told were toxic to all but some birds. Still, one of us scaled the blackboard after the umpteenth botched layup and just before the 6th grade and late August storms began like accidents. The grapes were hard, thick-skinned with resistance, and we spit the strange, sour pips into the grass, called for foul shots, and drank lemonade. Stripped of its only harvest, the vine never saw bud break again, and it would be decades before we could stomach Jersey wine. So that's a New Jersey poem. I come from New Jersey, but I live in Miami, where I've been here for almost 30 years. And I know I always read in my backyard, and it's so beautiful out here. But I like to go back to New Jersey in my poetry every once in a while. So I'm going to move on to my next book, which is called American Sentencing. And this is also a poem, I guess, about my childhood. This is really about when I was sort of a fetus, if you think about it that way. This is a medical poem. American Sentencing is really all about illnesses, chronic illnesses, mental illnesses, invisible illnesses. And the invention of amniocentesis is a true story. My mother was pregnant with me. They invented amniocentesis. She was having a very difficult pregnancy, but they had not invented the ultrasound. So they would just guess where I was. Mother, in your womb, I am an experiment. You pass on not immunity, but its silvery underside. Give permission for the needle, like an arrow, to birth holes in this temporary home. Sip the fluid, like a taster of fine wines, without the benefit of a visible image. No bigger than a black widow's spider, the doctors must guess where I am and agree there is nothing to be done. I am poison to both of us. Unsafe harbor, you insist on mooring me to your designated slip, tossed by rash after rash of storms. I will remove myself early. Still ill, of course you will not care for me right away. Of all the eggs you might have nourished, I am the one who breaks you. And I'm going to move on to my most recently published book. This is called The Burning Where Breath Used to Be. And this also has a bit about illness, a large part about family and faith. Judaism is a big part of this book. And anti-Semitism, I wrote a lot of this after the last election. So the title poem of this book is called Surge and Epigenesis. And it's largely about a hurricane, Hurricane Irma, when we decided to ride out the storm because my husband was on call. And that was really, really not a smart thing to do. But it reminded me of ancestral trauma, really. I felt it deep in my bones. So this is what came out of it. I have a terrific burning where my breath used to be. A blister of coal I heave with energy on lockdown, ready to consume at any moment this voracious fuel. No one has to tell me when. In a single suitcase, my picked over clothes are sealed, documents evaporated to clouds like a reservoir in drought, wedding diamonds threaded into crevices only prison guards might think to search. I have known this rising for millennia, awake, asleep, I yellow with it, turn sun. My third full-length book is about Miami, and this is when they were starting to use Miami as the poster child for climate change and telling us that we were going to drown. And we did see a lot of flooding around that time, so I decided to write a book about what it would be like if Miami did go underwater and people decided to stay. I'm going to read the last poem in the book, which is also the title poem. It's called Skiing Barefoot Over the Wrecks, and it's about water skiing barefoot after Miami has gone underwater. And it has an epigraph from Adrienne Rich, where the title comes from. I came to see the damage that was done and the treasures that prevail. The trick is to ease the hold on the handle. Don't allow knuckles to knot like curtains over a rod braced between the shoulders of a double-hung window. I lie back in the water to start, feet meeting hands greeting rope at mid-thigh, ears immersed in the amniotic bouillon, listening only to the heartbeat of the ocean, as if there is no other world, was never another world below me. I give a thumbs up to the driver of the boat who will ease me, feeding me out from the other end of this cord before pulling taut, and I resist the drag. This is not labor. The spray claps my face like applause, each drop one of approval. And while the wind in my hair is generated, the source of its power is not man-drilled, not a god, but the childish, oblivious sun who cares nothing about what goes on underneath it, about what it can or cannot dry up. And I am up, riding the weedy surface on the flats of my feet, over flooded, flattened houses where ghosts billow under my soles, blowing up into a white-tipped wake that my heels zip through, sun-bruised, mango-cured, tough as sharks. Still, they are spiny sea urchins, these spirits of screened-in Florida rooms, where pianos used to wait for hands, reluctant as fire in wet sawgrass, underutilized kitchens owned by diners who preferred restaurants, bedrooms that saw nothing more than too little sleep, achieved with the open mouth of the dead and disrespectful. Now the Dade County pine floors, once so prized and polished, or scarred by termites, and the careening claws of dogs have rotted either way into driftwood. Coral has gone back to coral. The dogs who have been left to us wear life jackets, and the dead live again, reefs for grouper and parrotfish. If I look down into the foundations of heartbreak and recovery, epiphanies and realizations, culminations and failures, I too will fall, forgetting all fundamentals, unable to tuck and roll, my external walls shooting nails in every direction to wash up later on the beaches like teeth, each room of my body cartwheeling into disrepair. So I keep my eyes forward toward what would be the ponytails of palms and the canopies of mangoes if those trees still rooted here, and my grip casual, thumbs lined up next to index fingers as if on a golf club, holding on to nothing too dear, too dearly. Changing gears a little bit, we recently moved. Actually, it's not so recent, but for a poet, it's recent because we never really unpack because we're always busy writing. And this is the first poem I wrote in the new house. It's called Birkat Habayit, which is the blessing for a new home in Hebrew. And it's also an ekphrastic poem, and you can see on the screen the painting that it's written after, which is called Empowered Woman. A woman is a bird when, wood under feet, dressed in flower parts, she surveys her private garden, ragtag, but everything in it equal to her heart. Downsize, they tell her, it's only a start. Learn to bolster what's beginning to sag. Wood under feet, dressed in flower parts. A woman is a thorn, poisonous dart. Planes fly away from the kite of her back, everything in them equal to her heart. Convertibles accordion, roofs hard. Oh, to feel again the pain of the egg. Wood under feet, dressed in flower parts. A woman goes rogue, winging wide, apart. Her flock caught in a current of jet lag, everything in it equal to her heart. One eye doll wide, one squinting and alert. She talons her home like a prized handbag. Wood under feet, dressed in flower parts. Everything in it equal to her heart. And I guess that's my real empty nest poem, which didn't stay empty for too long because then the pandemic hit and the kids came back and the nest was full again. It wasn't supposed to be full. And boy, did my muse go away real quick. And that's where I met Diane, because I started to take a class to get the muse back. And that worked out very well. The class was very helpful. And I started to write again. And this is the first poem I wrote in that class. And it's called Giant Swallowtail Origin Story. It's actually an abecedarian. You might have noticed that a lot of my poems are written in form. So this is written in alphabetical form. And since then, I've written about 10 of these, and I guess they'll be the next book. Although I do have another book coming out, so maybe this will be a book before then, after then. Who knows? Poets are so unpredictable. But I think I'll end with this. So I was going to do one more after that, but maybe you can just show the picture of the peacock after that. I live in a bird sanctuary now. I went from a mango grove to a bird sanctuary. So you can either show any of those pictures. Doesn't matter. We can close on those. But I'm going to end with this poem. It's called Giant Swallowtail Origin Story. Admire the orange dog caterpillar, born to look like bird crap, mottled splotch dallying on key limes, eating Edwardian colors of leaves, from moonglow to sunstreak, growing from speck of hummingbird waste to splatter of ibis. Its very survival dependent on junking itself as it pupates onto knotted bark. Nature had a lark, it seems, out of designs after monarchs, metal marks, mourning cloaks. No extravagance goes without overcorrection, even as the pentstemons' purple bells, quiescent for most of the season, ring in the breeze under the 6-inch diamond-cut wingspan that emerges from the twig of chrysalis. Undulating the salvia, porterweed, verbena, its transfiguration wants for nothing in this avid xeriscape and fears less, except you, plucking fruit from citrus trees, zest for your liquor's dark light. Thank you so much for having me. There's one of our resident peacocks. There's a huge, they call them an ostentation of peacocks, and you can see why. So they're everywhere, and they block the roads and honk at you like cars. And then that's what we left behind, all of our mangoes. We had 14 mango trees. So this will be our second season without picking mangoes, and I couldn't be happier. So thank you again. I appreciate being here. Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Shantae. Thank you, Roni. And thank you, Maxima. And thank you, everybody who's here listening. I really appreciate it.
And there you have it, tonight's Poetry Square. I want to thank all of our guests. The ladies did a beautiful job, gorgeous poetry, beautiful images. Join us again next month in January 2021. May it be a wonderful year, where we will have Frank Judge, who is from Rochester, New York. He's the president of Rochester Poets. We'll have Nick LaForce from Sacramento Poetry Center. And we'll have Mark Fisher, a friend and poet from Tehachapi, California, where I lived for almost 20 years before here. And we look forward to seeing everyone next month. Good night and stay safe.